Welcome to the first News OK Oklahoma football podcast. I'm Ryan Aber, joined by Jason Kersey. Jason, a little bit of a lull here after the spring game, but coming up Thursday, the NFL draft, a different kind of a year for Oklahoma's draft prospects. Really nobody who's maybe outside of Aaron Colvin that's definitely going to be drafted this weekend. It's a different kind of season.
I think Jalen Saunders is someone who should definitely be drafted, but then after that, I definitely think you fall off from, you have Trey Millard. He's the best fullback according to Mel Kiper, but is he going to get drafted? Gabe Eichert is everybody acknowledges as a really good center and a really smart guy and should get drafted, but who knows if he actually will. And then you get into guys like Brennan Clay, running back who had a nice career, or at least a nice couple of seasons, but isn't really seen as a lock for selection or for NFL success. And Damian Williams, another running back who was kicked off the team, and so there's all kinds of questions there. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this goes for the Sooners.
And we'd start off with probably three guys. You mentioned Jalen Saunders, so we'll throw in a fourth. The four guys who were most likely to get picked. First of all, Trey Millard and Aaron Colvin, guys who suffered injuries either during or after the season that have certainly hurt their draft stock. Where do you see those guys going?
I think Aaron Colvin, just from the things that I've read, he seems like a solid fourth, fifth round guy. I could see him falling below that. I don't think he'll get much above that, though. I mean, I think he could have if it wasn't for that ACL tear at the Senior Bowl, which is just devastating. I mean, you hate to hear about that, but so I mean that's sort of where I would imagine Aaron Colvin going. As far as Trey Millard, he would probably be a Saturday pick in the last couple of rounds, but I think somebody's going to get a steal with him, especially once he gets healthy, because not only can he carry and catch the ball and block, I mean, he can play special teams, although that's how his OU career ended. But he can do it, and he enjoys doing it. So I think you're going to get a steal with him. And
you mentioned Jalen Saunders. What is it about him that you think makes him likely to get a chance at the next level and a significant chance? I know he's an undersized guy, but had a great, especially finish to his OU career.
Yeah, he's an electric player. He's fast. He's shifty. Yeah, he's not very tall. I mean, there's no question about it. He's not a big guy at all, but he plays big, and I think that's something that you've seen. I mean, there's been all kinds of examples of guys who don't have the prototypical size at wide receiver in today's NFL that make it. I mean, I think you look at Wes Welker as somebody nobody really would have thought would make it, but he found a way to make it as a slot guy, or sort of guys like that. I could see him succeeding in that role. And I think if he gets to the right offense, I mean, you're telling me he couldn't succeed in the New Orleans Saints offense, something like that. Surely he could, or the Eagles, something like that.
And I think also you look at fit for some of those guys. You talk about some of the injured guys like Trey Millard and Aaron Colvin. We've seen the San Francisco 49ers have had a history of taking shots on these kind of guys late in drafts who had a bright future ahead of them, suffered an injury that was going to keep them out probably their entire first year of NFL football, and take a shot at those guys and be successful with them down the road.
Yeah, and there's really no reason not to, especially when you know that they're talented, that they've been productive in their college careers at a major university, and that they're good character guys. And with very few exceptions, these guys haven't really given people that many problems in that regard, especially guys like Trey Millard and Aaron Colvin. So I would think there's really not a whole ton of risk by using a later round pick on a guy like that. It could work out, and if it doesn't work out, you're really not out that much.
And also with these guys, it's not like we're talking about somebody who's significantly injury prone. Both of these things were freak injuries. I know Colvin has been banged up a little bit, but nothing that would make you think that he's going to be a long-term injury risk guy.
Right, and he has some time to heal up. I mean, the other thing about Colvin is he would have had maybe some time to heal up his shoulder if they didn't need him so bad in that Kansas State game. I think you remember.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, they might not have won that game if he hadn't come in and helped.
I don't think there's any doubt
Tyler
in
Lockett.
that game that they had to have him at that point.
Yeah.
They tried to get by without him, and it obviously wasn't going to be successful. They throw him out there as bad a shape as he was in, and he's able to slow down Lockett and really make a difference in that game and turn their season around in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of where the turnaround began. I know they beat Iowa State the week before, but the Kansas State game was really where the season turned and became what it became. So you really can – it's not hyperbole, I don't think, to say that Aaron Colvin in many ways saved their season.
And another big factor in the turnaround was Colton Bester. The play he made at the end of the Bedlam game that kept hope alive for OU they were able to win that game because of that. They were able to get into the Sugar Bowl because of that, and they were able to win the Sugar Bowl with a great performance by Colton Bester. Mm-hmm. How much does that help his stock going into this weekend, and whether he's drafted late or goes in as an undrafted free agent?
He's a very intriguing guy to me because when he played at East Mississippi Community College, he was a star. They won the national championship with him out there. He was a high school quarterback. This is just a really good athlete. And when he came to OU, I think everyone will remember that there were big expectations for him because they had just suspended Jazz Reynolds and Trey Franks and Camille Jackson. The only receiver that was back with a career Division I catch was Kenny Stills. So at that time, it looked like Colton Bester was going to come in and they were going to need him and Trey McTwire. We all know what happened with Trey McTwire, but Colton kept his nose clean. He didn't do anything wrong necessarily. It just didn't happen for him. And then you add in Jalen Saunders and Justin Brown show up out of the blue and get their immediate eligibility. That set him back. And he admits that he wasn't in great shape. I remember talking to him for a story earlier this season. And he said that, his nutrition was really bad, and he never realized how important that was until they got a team dietitian with Tiffany Bird. And they and the Headington Hall and the training table, and they sort of put more of an emphasis on that. So I think that certainly made a difference too. But even as a senior, he was sort of getting acclimated. Then you add in the fact that there was not consistent quarterback play between Trevor Knight and Blake Bell all season. Between two guys who played really well sometimes and really bad sometimes. So I think that made things tough on Colton. But yeah, the play at the end of Bedlam where he knocks the ball out of Justin Gilbert's arms was as critical a play as there was all season. And then he goes into the Sugar Bowl and has a big performance against a great defense. So I think he spent time working with Jeff Garcia in the offseason, and Jeff believes that he's a guy who really has a high potential, and if anybody would know, it would be the former Pro Bowl quarterback.
Yeah, he's worked with some pretty good wide receivers along the way.
They haven't always treated him right, but he has.
Speaking of the NFL Draft, we're now joined by a special guest, former Sooner center, and hopefully NFL draftee Gabe Eicher. Gabe, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
First of all, we're gonna talk a lot about OU football and your career moving forward, but got to ask you about the Thunder. What do you think about the way that Clipper series began last night?
Yeah, obviously, and an unfortunate start to the series, but it's just one game. They just got to be able to shake that off. There's no way the Clippers can shoot the way they shot last night. I don't think that'll be consistent. Chris Paul going 8 from 9 from 3 is not going to happen every game. So still like their chances. Just got to come back with a strong performance in Game 2.
And it's not like they haven't bounced back before in this playoffs.
Exactly.
Gabe, Jason here. You came to OU a tight end and probably imagined your career going a whole lot differently. I mean, can you sort of reflect on just how your career went? And I mean, did you ever imagine you'd be entering the NFL draft a center?
Obviously, you come to college expecting to play a position, and but things change. The spring of 2010, the coaches kind of approached me and asked me what I thought about switching offensive line, and basically I just said I trusted them and trusted that they were making the best decision for me and the best decision for the team. So I ended up making the switch and playing in 52 games and starting 50, and it all worked out. So, sometimes you just got to put some faith in people and what they do, and that's what I did, and worked out and had a great career at the University of Oklahoma and had a great experience.
Last year, when Lane was getting ready for the draft, he talked a lot. He was pretty open about the fact that switching from being a skill position guy to being an offensive lineman, being a big guy, was a little bit of an adjustment for him mentally. Did you sort of go through the same transition that he did?
Yeah, you really got to change your mentality as a football player. As a tight end like Lane and I were, you're thinking you're going to be catching passes and making plays and get your name called over the PA system. But offensive line, it's about being unselfish and it's about being a team player. And that was wasn't that hard of a switch for me. I've been expecting to be more of a blocking tight end anyway, so I was just blocking on the inside instead. But yeah, it's definitely an adjustment in mentality, and kind of what to expect from the game. But yeah, I completely understand what Lane's talking about there.
And Gabe, there's been a lot of talk about the NCAA and a lot of the different things that they're doing for athletes and maybe what needs to change about the NCAA moving forward. First of all, you were sort of right in the middle of that with everything that happened with what's now known as Pastagate. What was that experience like for you and when it came out? And I know you had some fun with it and got a nice little haul from Olive Garden out of it.
Yeah, I think everybody made the best out of that situation. We all realized how ridiculous that was to, make that a big deal. So Austin Woods and I enjoyed it. And yeah, I was able to, establish a relationship with Olive Garden, and they've been very, very kind to me and hooked me up with some food. And they're actually providing free food for a little post-draft get-together that I'm having on Saturday night. So, they've been really great, and I'm just glad that everyone's enjoyed it as much as we have. It's been a lot of fun to kind of just poke fun at and get some laughs.
So you still enjoy breadsticks?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Are we going to see some Olive Garden TV spots with Gabe Eichert in them before too long?
That'd be awesome because I would be getting paid then.
What are some of the things that you think that the NCAA can and should change to help out athletes? I know they've gone to the step of giving not only scholarship athletes but also walk-ons unlimited meals and snacks starting this fall in all likelihood. How big of a step forward is that, and what else do you think needs to happen?
I like the things that give the walk-on some more rewards for what they're doing, the time they're putting in. I think that's great for them, save them a lot of money. It also makes them, obviously some walk-ons contribute, some really don't, but that'll make the team closer because you have some great times at team meals, you have some great conversation, and I think it'll be a good step for team chemistry to have those guys there, make them feel like a true part of the team. And then, as far as the NCAA goes, there's a ton of things that they're trying to do. Like I said, the meal thing. I think it's moving in the step of kind of the direction of the NFL, where they're going to start limiting contact in practice, and kind of limiting the hitting you can do, just like the NFL has, to protect the players. And then when you get into the player compensation stuff, that's when it gets extremely complicated. You get into Title IX and kind of legislation and some litigation about this whole thing. It could be a long time before people ever see that, kind of come to fruition. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. So.
And as a now former college athlete, how much have you been following some of those developments, including the Northwestern unionization thing and some of these changes that the NCAA has tried to bring about?
Yeah, I follow what you guys put out there on Twitter. That's about it. It really doesn't concern me that much anymore. But I like to know what's happening to some of my buddies still playing, and it's interesting. I think it's a very intriguing argument. I think it's something that eventually could change the kind of structure and face of college athletics. So it'll be interesting to see how all that develops. And when it comes down to it, the most important thing is that they protect the players and that the players, get all the advantages they can out of their college experience. So I'm all for giving them whatever the NCAA wants to give them.
Gabe, going into the draft, what are your expectations for this week, or do you have any, or do you try to avoid thinking that way?
Yeah, I'm just, people keep asking me, and honestly, it's one of those things where I really don't know what's going to happen. I'm expecting, realistically to be picked on the third day, whether that's in the fourth round or the seventh round. I couldn't honestly tell you where it's going to be, when it's going to be, but I'm excited for it. It's one of those things where it's out of your control now. You kind of just have to sit and wait, just enjoy the moment, and realize how fortunate you are to be in a position to have the opportunity to be drafted. Not many guys get to say that they were drafted in the NFL draft. So I'm just trying to look at the bright side, not be disappointed that I'm not going first overall, but it's one of those things where just going to enjoy the moment with my family and friends.
One of the things I think a lot of people wondered about you with your future goals, your future academic goals, wanting to go to medical school, are those things you've had to answer for in meetings with these executives and scouts?
Yeah, several teams have asked me if I liked football. Football was important to me, and basically my answer was, just because I was successful, more successful than other guys in academics and off the field, doesn't make me want to play football any less, and it doesn't make me a lesser football player. If I'm a better football player than a guy that only has football in his life, then that's not my problem. But yeah, several teams asked me about that, and I've made it clear that football is something I love doing. I'd like to make it out of kind of into an 8 to 10 year career and enjoy being part of a team still. So, but I've made that very clear in conversations with teams.
That's interesting because I think that's something I'd never really considered before, but it almost is like you risk being penalized for being a good student.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I was getting, which football's a business at this point, so whatever they think, but I'd have to disagree.
You talked about that a couple times during the season, that you wanted to play football, and I guess you knew that was going to be something that would be brought up after your college career. Has it still been a surprise to you the way that some of these teams handle that?
I just think the teams are trying to find out as much information as they can, and they're just kind of digging to see what'll make me tick if I get mad if they ask me about it. That's mostly what I've drawn from it, is they're just seeing how I respond, and I've been very calm about it and made it clear my intention is to play football. So it's been a little surprising, but basically every team's done the same thing, and asked about it. So used to it by now.
We hear stories about some of the ridiculous questions that get asked during these interviews with teams. What is there any that stand out to you as some of the things that teams have asked that you've scratched your head about? Why did they ask that? What were they trying to get at?
There's been some interesting ones. Some teams have their kind of psychological team ask you some interesting questions. What animal you'd be if you were a month? What month would you be? Stuff like that. And then the Bengals at an interview in the Combine asked me random history questions, I think, to see if I was just really dumb or not. Like who bombed Pearl Harbor, name 3 presidents, what's 8 times 8. So it's stuff like that where you kind of just look at them and you go, really? But it's part of the process, and they wouldn't ask it if people didn't get it wrong sometimes.
Seems like it'd be easy to freeze up and miss some of those if you weren't expecting it.
Yeah, no, that didn't happen with me, but I assume that it's happened before. So, that the combine, that stuff, those interviews are pretty nerve-wracking. So if you don't have kind of control over your emotions and over your thinking, you could struggle, I suppose.
And Gabe, a couple days ago on Twitter, you mentioned that what kind of OU fan you were going to be now that your playing days in Norman are over. What kind of OU fan will Gabe Ikert be this year and 5 years from now?
I'd say die hard. It's I've always rooted for OU and grew up loving OU. So obviously going to be really invested in the next couple of years while guys that I played with, friends with, are still playing, and then I plan on being a great booster one day and supporting the program. And I love the University of Oklahoma, love the football program, so obviously going to follow it very, very closely and get my inside information when I need to get it.
Absolutely.
You speaking of Twitter, you've obviously become very active on Twitter. You seem to enjoy interacting with people on that platform, and I understand you're going to be doing a Google Hangout during the draft. Can you talk a little bit about that and just your sort of attitude towards social media?
Yeah, I think social media is one of the most powerful tools in our country right now, and whether that's a good thing or not, I'm not sure, but you can meet a lot of people on there, you can get connected on there, and I just like to use it to show my humor, make some jokes, learn some facts from some of the news Twitters, and it's just something I enjoy doing because I love interacting with people. I love talking to people, love meeting new people. So, and then the draft day thing is it's my draft day, Google Plus little hangout, and I'm doing it. Derek Carr's doing it. A couple other guys are doing it, and it's just something where you get to interact with some fans. If some of your family aren't able to make it, they can get on there and enjoy the experience with you over kind of a webcast type thing. So it'll be fun to interact with the fans on the day of the draft, and it'll be able to take my mind off some things. So I'm excited for that experience. That, and Google sent me a free laptop to do it on, so that's a plus.
And you can take those things now.
Yeah, exactly.
And you talked about the Google Hangout. You talked about eating some Olive Garden Saturday night. What are the rest of your plans for Saturday when you expect to be drafted?
Oh, Saturday is going to start off with old Blake Bell's graduation party. So I will be going and supporting him for that. His whole family's coming in town, so I'll be at the Belldozers party, and then once that winds down, I'll head to Oklahoma City, meet up with my family, and then just kind of sit and wait, enjoy a beer or two, and have a good time.
All right, Gabe. Well, good luck on Saturday. We really appreciate you joining us on our first News OK Oklahoma football podcast.
All right, boys. Have a good one.
Thanks, Gabe.
Thanks, you too. We've talked about the draft, which starts Thursday night, goes Friday and Saturday. Now we're going to talk about this OU football team. Jason, spring football, we've been able to get some distance and some perspective on it. What's the number one thing you learned about this team throughout the spring football process?
I think one of the things I learned, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel like in some ways I feel less confident about what I know about this team, if that makes sense.
Which we should all know the way the last season went, that
yeah.
Not to be too confident in what we think we know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you go beat Alabama with Trevor Knight playing the way he did. My initial thought was, well, this is going to be a season where they have a chance to win the national title. And I still think that, but I'm not as sure about that anymore because I don't know who's going to make plays on this offense. I still don't. I think there's a lot of guys who could. I don't know who's going to carry the ball. I think I know that Trevor Knight's going to be good, but I really don't know that even at this point because of the spring game. So it's really kind of an interesting thing. I know Sterling Shepard's going to be a playmaker, but beyond Sterling Shepard, I really don't know who's going to make plays on this offense.
That to me is one of the interesting things about this team is you look at all the questions they have on offense, and obviously they feel really good about Trevor Knight and the way he finished the season, but you look at the wide receivers, you only have Sterling Shepard as a guy who's consistently made plays. You look at the linemen and you lose Gabe Eichert and Bronson Irwin, and you've got a lot of guys who have played well but have been banged up throughout the spring and the end of last year. And then the running backs, you have really no one who's been asked to carry any kind of a load. So what's the biggest question out of all those groups, or can you separate them?
I think you can separate them. It's a little bit difficult too because it's just sort of all plays into this. Who's gonna make plays? But as far as looking at the running backs, Keith Ford is obviously the guy I think everybody expects to at least at the beginning of the season be the running back, the guy they call on. There's been a lot of talk about Alex Ross, but there was also a lot of talk about Alex Ross last spring, and then that didn't pan out. And then what we saw in the spring game, we saw 1 out of 15 practices, so it's kind of difficult to put a whole ton of stock in that and say that's a fair way to judge Alex Ross's entire spring. But that's all we really got to see. So if I was a betting man, I would say that Keith Ford is the guy. But I also think Joe Mixon is going to really make a push for it when he gets here in the summer.
And also you look at Dimitri Flowers, a guy who was a freshman who came in the spring, was able to go through spring workouts. We saw him in the spring game. And you see some of the things that he does that are really similar to what Trey Miller did, but you also see some things that he has the potential to do maybe even greater than what Trey Miller did. What was your impressions of him, and how big a part of this offense can he be?
I think he's going to be a huge part of the offense from the very first game. I think that was obvious in the spring game when Trevor Knight targeted him on his first, I think, 3 pass attempts. Yeah. To me, that said everything. And Trey Millard was a great player. There's no question about it. And I'm certainly not trying to close the book on Trey Millard or move on from him. But what you said is right. I think just watching Dimitri Flowers play, he seems like he might be able to do more than even Trey Millard did in terms of making plays with the ball in his hands. Obviously, Trey Millard did that. I don't think any of us will ever forget the play against Texas where he jumps over a guy and stiff arms a guy at the same time. But just his athleticism, he at least just watching, he looks like he might be faster than Trey Millard. So I think all of those things are gonna matter, and I really believe he has a chance to be a great player at OU.
And obviously, some of the questions are, can he block the way that Miller did and be used in so many different ways, where you put him at a tight end, you put him at a fullback, and use him in so many different ways where you can change what you're doing on the field, the look you're giving, without changing the personnel.
That's the thing that's so key about that position, and they've always had a guy like that in a way. Trey Millard was,
and they're always Bob Stoops' favorite player.
They're always Bob Stoops' favorite player. Trey Millard was the most versatile, I think. He was the most dynamic, maybe. But I think you go back to Seth Luttrell and J.D. Runnels, who's a favorite of ours, just from an interview standpoint.
Absolutely.
Matt Clapp was a guy like that. Brody Eldridge was a guy like that. They always seem to find these guys, and they've evolved. That's the great thing about it. The interesting thing about it is that they've had reliable, relatively versatile guys in this offense really from the beginning, but the position has evolved to where J.D. Runnels wasn't going to carry the ball. He wasn't really a threat to do that, but some of these other guys were. And now you look at a guy like Dimitri Flowers, he may even evolve beyond what Trey Millard was able to do. So it's really interesting that OU keeps finding these guys, and you wonder when the heck some of these other teams are going to start noticing that and starting to try to find them themselves.
Absolutely. And sticking with offense just for one more item, Blake Bell, obviously there's been a lot of talk about his shift to tight end and what his injury did to push that back. But what do you think about his role right now, and how big can he be, either making plays from the tight end, which we haven't seen very much of it from this team in recent years, or blocking?
That's the blocking, I think, is going to be the toughest thing for him to adjust to, just because he's never really done it before. He's caught passes some in high school. Obviously, there's a huge difference between playing wide receiver as a sophomore in Kansas high school football and playing tight end at OU. But I think at least there's a base there. Blocking is going to be tough. The thing that I think Blake Bell brings to this team more than anything else, and I think it was important that he came back, is that he's a team player. He's a good teammate. And I think that if he's not elected a team captain, I'll be stunned.
I would be more than stunned. I don't think there's any doubt that he will be a team captain. He deserves to be a team captain with the way he's handled things. I think they couldn't have asked for a better representative for this team than what Blake Bell's given.
Yeah, definitely. And, he had a chance to go play quarterback somewhere else. He could have gone to Tulsa if he wanted to.
He's graduating this week, and he can go. Would be able to go and be eligible immediately. So.
Yeah, so he had a chance to go play quarterback. Decided to stay. Now the other thing about Blake Bell is that even if this doesn't necessarily turn into a bunch of playing time for him, which it may not, because we saw Taylor McNamara had a big spring game, I think he may be primed to sort of have a breakout season. So this may not work out the way that Blake Bell wants it to in terms of his playing time. But the way that he handled last season was first class from the very beginning. And I think that that he's going to come to work, he's going to work hard, he's going to be a good teammate, he's going to be excited for his teammates when they do well, regardless of whether he's playing or not. And to me, that might be the most valuable thing he brings to the OU football team next year. Absolutely.
And now looking at defense a little bit, the front seven was so good last year, and most of those guys are coming back. But I think the biggest question for me when you look at this defense is what's going to happen at inside linebacker. You got Frank Shannon, whose status right now is very much in doubt. You don't know if he's going to be back. Jordan Evans is a guy who had some playing experience last year as a freshman, did pretty well in that playing experience, was banged up a little bit toward the end of the season. But really outside of those guys, there's not a whole lot of depth there until you get to like Tay Evans, who's coming in. So how important is Jordan Evans right now with what they're doing defensively?
He's huge. He's one of the most important players on the whole defense, because Frank Shannon was one of the best players on the team. And I'm speaking about him in the past tense because I don't think he'll be back. But, I mean, I guess anything can happen. But based on what we know he's been accused of and what he's dealing with, I would be absolutely stunned. Maybe even more stunned than I would be about Blake Bell not being a captain if Frank Shannon's back. That's sort of how I feel about that. So that makes Jordan Evans vitally important, and his health vitally important. Like you said, there's just not much depth there.
Absolutely. And you look back at that recruiting class 2 years ago and the way that they finished, they were able to get Dominique Alexander flipped from Arkansas at one point. And he had a huge season last year when Corey Nelson went down. He's going to be a big part of this defense this year. They were able to get Jordan Evans, who was right in their backyard, but who hadn't really gotten much recruiting attention until late in the process. They were able to get him on board, and it wasn't as easy as, this is a former OU player's kid. He really thought long and hard about that and decided that OU was a place for him. So I think that the way that they finished their recruiting 2 years ago was very important, and it's certainly going to be big for this team this year with those guys. You lose, Corey Nelson moves on, Dominique Alexander steps up into a full-time role, which he had the last half of last year. Jordan Evans plays, and how big he's going to have a chance to be in this defense. I think that's going to speak really to how this season goes for this team.
Yeah, definitely. And what you said about recruiting, I think, is right. The fact that these coaches are able to pluck these guys out of relative obscurity, like Jordan Evans, is really important because, OU hasn't hauled in a top 10 recruiting class in a long time. Even this year, when everybody was really excited about the way it went and the way they closed, it still was a 15th, according to Rivals. So they're going to have to just continue to evaluate talent well, and that's what they've done. I mean, I think with a lot of these guys that have made plays, Eric Stryker was, I think, a 4-star recruit, but I don't think anybody would have envisioned him doing what he's done at OU and what he likely will continue to do. So I think that's going to be really important, especially in this upcoming recruiting class, which right now, is sort of a little bit scary, I think, for some people.
Yeah, I think, and after losing 2 commits in the last few weeks, they lost Josh Werabako, the lineman from Cassidy, who's very highly thought of, lost Devontae Lampkin. But I think it's important to remember the way that this coaching staff has traditionally closed in these classes, where while this is certainly concerning, especially coming off the Sugar Bowl win, it's not something that has been out of character for these guys to have some struggles and then come back and finish strong over the last 2 months before signing day.
Yeah, and they even did that, I think, a couple of years ago when they signed Jordan Evans, and that was a recruiting class that got Jackie Shipp and Bruce Kittle and James Patton fired, and even then they closed relatively well. Even Jackie Shipp wound up getting a couple commits, even if I think I'm trying to remember what his name is. One of them didn't even make it to campus, but Charles Walker was part of that group.
Yeah, they think very highly of him moving forward, although with the depth on the defensive line right now, there's a question of how much he's actually going to get to play. But certainly they feel good about Charles Walker moving forward, and Jackie Shipp played a part in getting him to Norman.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jason, thanks for joining us. Thank you to our host, or our guest on our first News OK Oklahoma football podcast, Gabe Eichert. Remember, the NFL draft starts Thursday night and runs through Saturday. And we'll be back next week for another News OK Oklahoma football podcast.